In this video, I'm going to talk about Dillian Whyte and his alleged PED test, which happened early this afternoon in the UK, and kind of what that means for a rather really uninteresting heavyweight division to end out 2023. Let's groove out to the very groovy intro, and then let's hear me talk a lot. So, Dillian Whyte got an unspecified removal from his fight with Anthony Joshua. Extremely uninteresting fight, if you ask me. This is pretty much a wasted year for Joshua. It's a confidence rebuilder. He has 2 consecutive losses to Usyk. He's probably never been weaker as a pro boxer in terms of the belief behind him. I had my good friend Christian, who's a trainer. He also has a great platform, Mike Check Sports. Go and support him. He took offense to the fact that Anthony Joshua, I think, is a bit of a fabrication. He's had every single thing behind him, and if you look at his record compared to other fighters' records who've had a lot less promotional muscle behind him, he's basically gotten the very little, the average result I think most fighters would have gotten with as much money behind him and strategy behind him. I think it is a disappointment for where Joshua's going. He's never come in as a B-side opponent. He's always been the A-side fighter, and yet he was knocked out by Andy Ruiz in the rematch. It was just really, he fought Scary Mary, and then 2 losses to Usyk, who were not, I'm really high on Usyk. I believe in Usyk, but there's a chance that Usyk's not really a heavyweight, and Joshua just wasn't able to handle a world-class boxer and be the bigger man. We could also be overrating Usyk simply because we don't know if Joshua is that guy, because as many people, including my good friend James, said Usyk's unproven at heavyweight, and he's unproven. Why? Because we don't know how good Joshua is. Every big win Joshua's had, there's been a strategic element to his biggest win, probably in prime for prime, was Joseph Parker. That was a very, very competitive fight in which Joshua had trouble with Joe Parker's jab. Every other guy it's a number 1 contender, it's like a 37-year-old. So there's been an element of kind of correctly moving, like he beats Vladimir Klitschko. Well, Tyson Fury had beat him before, and Tyson Fury beat him more dominantly, but then that was a case of, here's the guy we really want to be the star, so he knocks out Klitschko, so now he is the guy. My criticisms of Joshua have always not been on the person or the competitor. The criticisms have come from the expectation. He was presented as the next great heavyweight, and he really is the next great Frank Bruno. Currently, everyone can change things. He's working with Derek James. His fight prior to this fight was a very forgettable one against Jermaine Franklin. Most people were fine with Franklin fighting Joshua because they felt Franklin had beat Dillian Whyte, and that was also a very skippable fight. The heavyweight division is awful right now. The heavyweight division is not making good matchups, and it's moving at a snail's pace, and that's just the facts, Jack. So now we come into this Dillian Whyte fight. It was basically put together as Whyte, for his whole career, has been a big punching, strong physical guy, not the most talented guy, but he's gotten by with a big motor and big engine. This is the second time he's tested positive for PEDs. He tested positive prior to the Oscar Rivas fight, and it was really strange how the whole situation went about, because it was like Dillian Whyte won't respond. It was actually kind of similar to what's happening with Conor Benn, if we think about it. Dillian Whyte sends certain comments, but you can't get a hold of him. Eddie fiercely defends him, and then there's never an apology, or maybe I'll be this. It's basically like, anyone that doubted me, I remember who you are. Here's this vague threatening message that I'm going to just chastise you, and then anyone that had my back, yeah, you're my brothers for life. Something of that nature. So now this is his second time having this happen. Kind of strange, we'll go through the process of it, but guys who are high work rate, big motor guys, toughness guys, going into the biggest fight of their career guys, when they test positive for a substance, and they're maybe not the most skillful guys, you have to wonder where there's smoke is there fire. And now, is Dillian Whyte just a really, really unlucky guy, or now this has happened twice, and there's a pattern? So that's something that you have to think about. I don't care. I don't care. I'm in that category where I think White's pretty long in the tooth in the sport. I wish him well, but it's time for him to think about life after boxing. The fight was not all that fascinating. I think it was fascinating kind of in the sense that UK fight fans enjoy both personalities. They come out, and I think the big interest in this fight was it seems like Anthony Joshua is extremely tentative and doesn't fully believe in himself anymore. And deeper than that, it looks like he's looking around his team and saying, hey, am I really this good? Because he's kind of starting to question where is my skill level at? And I think the interest for maybe me watching this fight was, how good is Joshua really? Like, does he really believe in himself? Is his self-confidence shot? Because we had a standard prior where Joshua had created X result against Dillian Whyte, and it's honestly one of his better wins. It aged really well. It's probably one of his first more interesting bouts. It was more interesting than his world title win over Charles Martin. So, I mean, that it's an interesting thing. And for those that say I'm harsh on Anthony Joshua, well, Anthony Joshua came into the sport being projected as an all-time great. So I simply hold all-time great standards to him. If he had to come in as a prospect, we would have held those standards. You are what you say you are. And I'm just simply holding up a mirror and then giving him a reflection based upon what I'm being told. So if anyone feels that way, that's why I criticize Joshua in that sense. Now, also, who could fill in? Well, I've seen a video of Otto Wallin saying stuff. I've seen that Philip Hrgovic and Dempsey McKean are on the undercard. I think the big thing is, and this is not going to sound great, is Joshua's not by any means an unbeatable fighter. I think he's pretty average to a little above average, and he can get caught by anybody. We've seen this with Andy Ruiz. He got caught by Andy Ruiz. He got knocked out. He got beat twice by Usyk when he was trying to leverage these big fights. He's not invincible, and if they choose to go on with this fight card, you have to find someone if you're looking to make that Wilder-Joshua fight in January, because Wilder will knock Joshua out. He's not going to take the power more than likely. If he can take the power, then it's an interesting fight, but more than likely, the fight will be a couple of rounds. Joshua gets hit, and then he's out. So what they need to do is they need to find someone where they're not going to mess up the church's money. And that's the big issue with this fight is Joshua, to me, this year was going to be spent on, let's get your confidence back and let's rebuild you. This is possibly going to give him shades of nightmares of what happened with Andy Ruiz. He's in his second fight with Derek James. Derek James, I don't buy Joshua's nervous because Errol had a bad loss to Terrence Crawford. Derek James, good coach, and honestly, at this point, really a coach doesn't matter for Joshua. He needs to step up himself. Coaches can only do so much. So it's really interesting because we went from a fight that I more than likely wasn't going to watch. I was going to watch his own highlights because it was really uninteresting, to now I'm casually interested to see how this saga plays out, to see if it's a more interesting bout. And we could get Joshua's fourth loss. If it's not strategic, I would not be shocked if the date gets pushed back, even by as far as when you see this video, or as soon as when you see this video, because there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of money at stake, and Joshua's pretty much at the end of his career, just like all these guys are, Usyk, Fury, and Wilder, and he's the one that doesn't really seem to have the elite trait of all those guys. When you look, it's like Wilder's got power. Yes, he's really limited, but if he hits, he's got Thor's hammer. Usyk can really box. Fury's really big and he can box, and he's got a hell of a chin. It's like Joshua's just kind of right in the middle on every attribute, which is great, except when he gets to the top, it's like he doesn't really have that one aspect. We thought it was going to be physicality, power, and toughness. It's not really showing. So for Joshua's team, this is about as big of a nightmare as you could have, because now a week into a fight where it didn't really even feel like he was all that interested in fighting in August. It felt like he wanted to just go into the Wilder fight. Now this fight that was basically a sparring session that could kind of go whatever way Joshua wanted because he's familiar with this guy. now turns into, are you fighting or are you going to postpone the bout? And DAZN, the biggest losers in all of this, their schedule's awful. So, I mean, if you're tuning in for all these big names, DAZN is not presenting the viewer with very much value right now. And I think it's hard to believe many boxing fans are continuing to consume their product because it's, if you look, Canelo's no longer on their network. Joshua may or may not be fighting in August, probably won't fight for the rest of the year. Virgil Ortiz probably not back for the rest of the year. You're essentially seeing developmental talent currently on DAZN. You're not seeing those big names that you used to see in 2019, which was the rise of DAZN. So I'm curious to see where DAZN goes from here, because they've really got to kind of pick up or develop or find a new marquee name in the sport, because the people they came in the sport with, they're leaving. It's like the app was built around the Golovkins, the Canelos, the Joshuas, the Katie Taylors. Well, all 3 to 4 of those fighters are about to be retired, and minor details, Canelo doesn't appear to be fighting on DAZN again. So this is my initial thoughts. When an opponent or a decision gets made, we'll do probably another video. But to me, Dillian Whyte, more accusations, more allegations. Highly suspicious that this keeps happening to this. Like, either he's really unlucky or we're starting to notice a pattern. And with the way he fights, like I said prior in the video, it kind of raises a red flag too, because his fighting style is based around physical attributes that maybe those type of substances might enhance and help someone fight that way. But that's just, I wouldn't even say allegations. That's just us thinking through things. That's not us condemning or putting a shadow, a burden, or doubt on someone. But I think it's highly suspicious. And for Joshua, he's in probably one of the worst spots ever, because there's this big card that he has to carry. And now, does he obligate the fans? Does he oblige them and give them a show? Or does he say, okay, I've got to really do what's best for me, postpone the event, and look for the biggest fight with Wilder? It's not a very good situation to be in when Joshua has basically been built as a moral fabric of Britain, not just British boxing. And he has to always kind of be the good guy for this image, this Sugar Ray Leonard character. Puts him in a very awkward situation. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. It's also interesting the news broke on a Saturday, a week before the fight was supposed to happen.